Thank you so much for joining me, Kari Franz, Fractional CMO, for this interesting conversation we're about to have on marketing overall. Um,
Hi, Andrea. Thank you so much for inviting me. I am a marketing expert. I've been doing this for over 3 decades and have worked for some of the largest and most influential financial services firms like Discover Card, Charles Schwab, Russell Investments, but I've also worked in the technology space like Google Cloud and Adobe. Now I'm a fractional chief marketing officer. I help small to mid-sized companies catapult their growth when they've gotten to a certain level of success, but need to scale and accelerate that growth. I help them do that by partnering with their sales team and just building stellar marketing strategies and then implement them.
what made you pivot into being a fractional CMO?
Great question. It's really two things. I think, first of all, I come from an entrepreneurial family. My father is in a completely different industry. He was actually in manufacturing, but he started his own business. And I saw the passion it took and the fortitude it took to grow something from a single person to a company with over 200 employees. At times, things are really bleak for entrepreneurs. I know when I was a young child, my parents had to remortgage their house a couple different times to make payroll so that they wouldn't get rid of all their really skilled workers. So I've seen the blood, the sweat, the tears that go into that, as well as I've worked for some amazing companies. And I have had the good fortune of sharpening my skills there and having access to the most amazing tools and resources, all a phone call away within my own company. And I just adore taking all of the skills that I've learned and bringing all that wisdom to medium-sized companies, right?
Yeah,
And many times they know they need marketing, but they don't know how to bring it to life.
yeah.
And I come in and help develop their strategies that is realistic, given their budget, their skill set that's in the company, what their goals are, and then actually launching all those marketing campaigns and programs, and then training up their internal staff to take over when I exit because I'm fractional. I'm only going to be there a while. Is it 6 months? Is it 2 years? It just depends.
And
So I
so
do it because I love it.
that's a great answer. Do you feel like you get to help them jump ahead in line because you are bringing these enterprise level strategies and concepts into their budget?
Absolutely. And that's the wisdom that I bring over 3 decades of doing this. So there really isn't a marketing problem I haven't solved successfully. And sometimes my small to medium-sized businesses are like, don't make me into a Google Cloud. We can't do this enterprise level work. And my answer is, you're right, you can't. Nor did you have the hundreds, if not thousands, of marketers. But I take the principles of what I've learned and scale it for these smaller companies. I know what works and what doesn't work. So it stops them from doing like those fits and starts, like, oh, what's the new shiny thing in
Yeah.
marketing? I should be doing that. It's, no, that's not really what you should be doing. And I see that a lot, that they're like, I know I need to do marketing. I know, for instance, I need to do lead gen. I need for people to know about me. So they contact maybe a local vendor, if you will, a local, not a marketer, but more of an agency, a smaller agency or something. And that agency oftentimes specializes in just a couple things. So they will sell them to implement those 2 or 3 things when that's really not the marketing mix that they need. So I come in and I really identify what their problems are and their goals are and where they're going. And then I bring in the appropriate partners to implement that marketing plan. We avoid spending money where it's just not going to be fruitful.
They're like buzzwords, like, I know I need lead gen or content
Right.
marketing, but what does that actually mean for your business?
Mhm.
It probably doesn't mean the same thing it does for major enterprises that have
Mhm.
giant content teams.
And what is the outcome of that? Okay, do it. I'll never say that blogging isn't important and developing content isn't important. It is important because it tells your leads, your customers, your value, but it might not be solving the problem that you really have.
Yeah.
If it's there's a time to be focusing on, for instance, partnering with sales and empowering your sales team to go get more leads and close more business versus partnering, like you said, an example, content management. There's a place for it, but it's also when it's the right time to be doing it. I really do describe myself as the orchestra leader, like the marketing orchestra leader, that I know how that whole symphony performs together. I truly do. But I know when to bring in certain elements at certain times in order to reach your goals. So we avoid a lot of waste.
That's super important when you're young and growing, especially in some of these newer industries you're working in. Talk a little bit about the type of verticals or industries that you are working with today.
Sure. Given my background, I work a lot in fintech because I have not only financial services experience, I also have experience at some of the biggest tech companies out there like Google Cloud and Adobe. So fintech is definitely an industry. Wealth management is an industry, like wealth management firms that have their own funds that they want to promote, and they're always in the mode of trying to find high net worth clients because I've done that. I also am moving into green investing. That's really a fascinating area. If your viewers aren't aware, there is a deadline of 2030 to be investing a massive amount of money, like trillions of dollars in green investments so that we can combat effectively the heating up of our earth. And we are not spending, as a global community, we are not spending and investing enough in green technologies to really make a difference. So I'm helping some companies, given my marketing experience and investing experience, helping them in that vertical. So it's very rewarding, and there's an appetite for it now. The younger investors, right? In my career, we chased baby boomers, right? Because that's the biggest wealth bubble there was. Boomers are now retiring, and their investment needs are different. They need to hold on to their wealth and live off their wealth. They're in retirement. But the Gen Xers, and especially millennials, they want to have their money going to a greater good. And they have an appetite to invest in green companies, in green investments. And to me, that is very encouraging. The mindset of an investor has changed, and they're showing the big investment houses,
Yeah.
that they want to have more investment in these kinds of technologies so that their money is making a difference.
That's a really interesting marketing target customer too. So when you're looking at the wealth management side, how do you target high net worth investors when you're asking them to invest in something that isn't, it's very different marketing than here's this product, take this, you know exactly what you're getting and you get instant gratification, or a service where I know there's going to be this ongoing relationship. Like, how exactly do you market a financial investment?
Yeah, you have to look at the type of investor you're talking about. So the investors that like to have a wealth manager, someone who's their coach, and they're not a do-it-yourself investor, there's very different kinds, right? So if it's somebody that wants someone to manage their money, right? Really what you need to do is market the firm itself. That you have to differentiate yourself from the other wealth management firms that are trying to talk to high net worth individuals. And what you find from all kinds of research is that the investor, the end investor, that high net worth investor, is having a really hard time differentiating, why should I go to wealth management firm A versus B versus C? They all look the same. So as a marketer, right, and I've done this, I was a CMO at a wealth management firm, was to rebrand the company so that it comes down to, once again, what are your core values? How do you communicate through your branding? And by that, not over your visual branding, your website, your brochures, all those things that continually reinforce what your company stands for, that's what needs to be communicated, because what you want to have happen is that your high net worth individual and the wealth management firm, your values are the same, right? Because people want to do business with people that they have the same kind of beliefs, right? Differentiate yourself and to talk about why they're different from the wealth management firm, the other wealth management firm that's in town.
It does sound like brand is so important in this aspect
Super.
because it's one building versus another. So, do you have a process that you really like to use when you are starting off? You've got a new client that you're going to be working with for a year or something. How do you start that conversation of defining
Mhm.
brand so you can stand out?
Yeah, absolutely. I do have quite the process
Okay.
that we go through. And it's iterative, right? And it's really looking at what is the company's values? What are the 3 to 4 principles that you really stand for, right? And then it's working through what is, and some of these things we've heard. What is your mission statement? Some companies have that. Great. But what are those values that you stand for? 3 to 4. Okay, great. Now let's walk through what is your service? What do you stand for? And what are all the proof points that support those values? And you get down to these really granular descriptions. And when you're selling a service, you have to, because you don't have a widget that someone can pick up and experience, right? It's not a pair of shoes. It's not a notebook. It's a service. So you have to articulate those things really well. And there is a process of going through and discussing that with the leaders of the organization, and then building a collaboration of having your sales team part of it too, to say, what are you hearing on the street? What are you hearing versus what they're saying about the competition? How do we write this so it's so crystal clear that someone will understand why you're in business? Not what you do, why you do it. Because that's why people want to work with you. It's the why. And I think especially when you're talking about managing your wealth, generational planning, right? When you pass money on to your family, it is very much the why. And it is a very important relationship that you build with your wealth manager.
I feel like you're asking me to give you my money and trust you with that, this thing that I've worked.
So
So
hardcore.
that trust is so important. I'm
Mhm.
wondering now with some of your newer clients in this green space, now not only are you having to build trust, you're also building this sense of responsibility, maybe. Talk a little bit more about how that pivots what you're doing or expands on what you're doing specifically for
That
that
is, yeah,
vertical.
question, because what's happening in the wealth management space is that over time, decades, really, these wealth managers, they call it a book of business, right? They build their book of business. It's really all of the people that they are helping, right? All those high net worth people they're helping. So in generations work differently and want to be communicated with differently, right? So those boomers that they have helped for 30 years, right, have a different expectation of how they're going to be worked with, how they're going to even be communicated with. Now, fast forward, that broker that's maybe very accomplished, 50 years old, right? He's been doing it for 20, 25 years. Now he has to find new high net worth customers, and those are millennials. And millennials are different. That's the digital technology, right? The digital generation. So these more mature brokers, they have to learn, you know what? Not everything's going to be an in face-to-face meeting. Maybe some of it's going to be like this. It's going to be all virtual. Maybe you're going to have to start texting more often, for example, certain information, that's how they digest things, right? So it's a shift in even how these more mature brokers are dealing with their clientele. And it is incredibly important, because I know this from being at Schwab, is that when the parents pass away and their wealth is transferred to their children, the children, more times than not, don't want to stay with the same broker their parents had, because they're seen as a little too gray haired, not innovative. They can't talk to me. They don't really relate to me. And so these more mature brokers that are very good at what they do, very good at investing money and building relationships, they really have to learn a whole new way to interact with some of these younger high net worth individuals. Different breed, but it is a huge flux that's happening in that vertical.
Do you find, are you now basically having to have these brokers, they're making TikToks and they're making YouTubes and they're out there making content?
I wouldn't say that. I would never put a business to business company on TikTok. Okay, it's not reputable. That's for your consumer brands and things
Right.
like that. But I do think, like I said, I think they have to be more open to have Zoom meetings and things like that because your millennials are chasing their kids around. So you got to catch them. And I can't always come to your office. But there's a benefit there too. You're not then restricted just by your geographic area. And I think what's also happened at a macro level since the pandemic is that people are more comfortable with this too. That they are more open to doing that. So it's really a way of just changing your ways of how you interact with people.
When do you know it's time to rebrand or relook at brand because of these inflection points, right?
Mm-hmm. I think a lot of it is if you're seeing stagnation and growth, you're not seeing new assets. They call it assets under management. You're seeing a much slower pace in your assets and management coming in the door. I think you do have to take a hard look and be like, why is it slowing down? Look at who your clientele is right now. Is the average age and where are they in their investing journey? Where are in there, right? If too many of them are towards the end in retirement, you better look at your portfolio of clients and start looking for younger investors. So I think that is a lot of it. I think the other thing is if there's just a saturation in your area as well, start looking at your competition. How are they branding themselves? What do they look like? Do we all look a little too similar? Do we all have the same desk with a computer and the customer sitting across it and we're all just looking at the computer, looking at your pie charts of stock spots and cash? Got to enliven your brand. You have to enliven it. And you and I both, we're both marketers. If you look at phenomenal brands that have survived for 100 years, right? They do reinvent themselves. They look at what they've done and they're like, is this out of date? We're out of touch with our people. And that's why you'll see, for instance, changes in logos. Even that's a simple example, right? You modernize your logo. You modernize, if it's a packaged good, you modernize your packaging, right? To attract your new audience. So it's the same thing when you're looking at service companies, right? Without losing your core strength. We're not going to take it so off course that it's going to hurt your brand. Never. It's to build it and attract new clientele.
So with the new green investing clients that you're working with, are you finding there's anything unique because it has to do with green versus traditional investing?
I think one of the first things is that the millennial generation has really pushed that. And they literally voted with their dollars, right? And that the management of some of the biggest investing houses in the United States, it was a small part of their investing portfolio philosophy, right? And then it just got to a point where millennials and they were like, no, I don't want to invest in the same old industries that are contributing to climate change. I don't want to do that. Where is the innovation? I want to use my money for a greater good. It was a wake-up call. So they had to, and they were smart to, start to developing different funds, et cetera, that was involved in green investing. And their practices grew like phenomenally well. Merrill Lynch is one that comes to mind. Yeah, their practice just took off in terms of green investing.
Amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see that there's any sort of additional trends when you're looking at marketing from the financial services industry besides just trying to attract millennials? Is there anything that you think that if you are one of these smaller mid-sized companies that wants to compete with the big ones that have been around forever, that you'd recommend they focus on if they hired you?
Okay, pause. Can you, so let's talk about that again.
Yeah.
Can you
My
tell me that again? Because that's a really good question.
Yeah. One other way to think about it is like you brought on a new client that's one
Mhm.
of these small, mid-sized businesses, and they need to compete against the Merrill Lynches and the Schwabs out there. Where's the first place that they should prioritize? Because obviously they don't have the giant budgets. And is it that they should always prioritize brand, or is it that you want to assess, or is it that there's certain aspects that they could lean on so that they can sneak in? Like on the tech side, startups tend to sneak in by being more agile than the beasts out
Mhm.
there. So is there something like that in the financial industry that these smaller ones can, this is your opportunity to sneak in, was where I was going with that question. And you can think on it.
Yeah, I need to think on it. It's very true. If you're looking at financial services industry in general,
Yeah.
it was the tech startups within that vertical that just blew everybody out of the water, like Robinhood, right? There was this app, this robo investing app that they came out, and all the younger folk was like, yeah, I'll do that, right? And then it was Schwab and Fidelity that then started doing robo investing. It took a lot longer for them to develop it, but they couldn't ignore it anymore. In the beginning, they're like, this is silliness. And we've been talking about wealth management firms, so I'm not saying they're going to develop a robo app or something like
Yeah.
that.
We could
Um,
pivot to another industry too, another vertical. Oh, maybe the green thing.
Financial services,
So for financial services, is the way in for smaller, is this green thing and writing what's trending, what's popular. And that might be their way to get ahead.
I would
Okay.
say assessment, branding. Yeah, and looking where they are, obviously, in
Yeah, like
relationship
mapping out where
to,
you stand as
yeah, relationship to
Mhm.
when they want to retire, what their goals are. But that's
Okay.
not new news, but I can talk to it.
Okay. Um, so what advice would you have for one of these smaller mid-size companies that want to try to break through and stand out, and they're fighting against the large entities that have been around forever? What would you do if they hired you?
Yeah, I think my consulting practice always starts with an assessment. I need to get to know their company really well. What have you done in the past? What is your branding right now versus your competition? What are your goals? What are you looking to achieve? What has worked in the past? What hasn't worked in the past? And then I look at what's happening in the business climate and in their area and all those kinds of things, and then make my recommendations. But it is different for every company. I do not have just a cookie cutter approach for every single company that I work with. We spoke a lot about millennials, but we skipped Gen X. So it's boomers, Gen X, and then millennials, and then we keep going down, right? The Xers should not be ignored, right? They're still probably 10 years from retirement, and they do make up a tremendous amount of investable assets. And the millennials, there's always such talk about millennials, but they too, they were given a bad rep because they had a lot of debt. But if you look at the debt, it's really their college education or graduate school that's causing all that debt. So in a way, it's good debt. Otherwise, they would not be able to be having those high net worth, those high paying jobs and develop their wealth. But I just think you need to, and this is classical investing practice, obviously know your customer, know their goals, where are they trying to build their wealth for, and then you need to develop that level of trust. Trust is very important, and that's one-on-one communications so that you can really keep that communication going and trying to solve their needs. Once again, it is branding. You need to stand out from the crowd. You need to have a brand that communicates trust. In the financial services industry, Gartner and all these major firms, it's always about trust. And then looking at what each generation wants from their investments, right? Boomers, it's more security because they're moving towards retirement or in retirement. Xers are almost there. They still have to have some of their portfolio in a growth phase, right? But it's probably a little bit smaller than they did 10, 15 years ago. And then your millennials have a ways to go. But what they want to invest their money in is very much socially focused.
When you're looking at and in your process of developing out the brand, how do you coach them or work through it where they can have a brand that can talk to boomers, Xers, millennials, Z
Mhm.
eventually, et cetera.
Yeah. I think once again, it goes back to what does your firm stand for? What are its principles? What does it believe in? What is it? And then that umbrella of branding, of messaging will adjust per generation, but the core of it is still rings true for everyone, right? It's expansive enough that it does resonate with each generation. The
So
trick is to make it interesting, an industry that is very staid, right? And that is very conservative, as it should be. We're dealing with people's life savings. But the art of it is to develop a brand that is still interesting and engaging and people want to learn more about.
I love that. I love that concept of having a brand that's engaging, even when you are in a bit more of a reserved
Mhm.
field like this. So it sounds like it's a lot like you develop out the brand and then maybe the channels and verbiage is as you're seeing everything evolving in the financial space, moving into this green space, as you're seeing the generations evolving as our target market, where do you see the future of marketing in this space as we continue moving forward?
I think everyone can't ignore AI these days, right? And that is permeating so much in terms of marketing. And I think that it has its place and it is a great tool to help marketers. I think it can help us uncover pain points perhaps that our clientele are trying to solve and at least give us a great place to begin some of the thought work. But it's always going to be a tool and you'll never replace the creativity of the human mind. So I think the future we need to embrace AI for productivity and for brainstorming and efficiency within a firm. But where are we going in terms of marketing? I think some of it, there's always new channels to consider, just like what last 20 years or so, we as marketers had to embrace social media that changed marketing mix so much. But I think some things ring true, and it's about understanding your audience. Who are your main customers? What's that profile like? And why should they pay attention to your company versus someone else's? And it always boils down to a very human element. It's people want to do business with people that have like that's where they will spend their money. And
Yep.
that's where their loyalty will remain.
I feel like you've made the future less scary because at the end of the day, you just go back to the core of marketing, which is super
Yeah.
important.
Right, you're still been dealing with human beings and all of their strengths and weaknesses. But the brands that really survive the longest are the ones that adjust and still really value their clientele.
Yeah, bringing it back to that, I think is so important and that we're all human because I think it's way too easy to
Mhm.
get all the technology and the shiny objects, but nope, bring it back to the human is such a strong place to start with brand and brand ends up becoming that thing you connect with, right? Keri, thank you so much for joining me for this conversation, deep dive into marketing. My guest today was Kari Franz, Fractional CMO. Where can they learn more about you?
Oh, thank you for this. It's been terrific. You can learn more about me by going to my website, which is brigadmarketingservices.com, or go on to X and go to @Kari Franz.
Perfect. Thanks for joining me. This was a fun conversation.
Thank you so much. Be
Right.
honest. Did I
Yeah.
babble too much?
No, no, we have people that talk a lot. So this was good. It was a good cadence. I think we covered a lot, which was good. And you see how I run things. I like to just have smart conversations with smart people. And that's what these things are. Because I think that's a lot
Yeah,
more interesting than going through the,
real.
yeah,
It's real.
exactly.
But I hope I added some value.
I I think so many companies struggle with this chasing shiny objects and wanting to do the next cool thing that what you're portraying is super important. Go back to the basics. It doesn't matter how shiny and techy and blah blah blah. If as a human being, I'm like, I don't know what is this happening? That's not
Mhm.
good.
Yeah. And I think we become so tech focused that it's, do we really need some of these tools? can you just call somebody?
Yeah. I know.
Can you just relate to them as human beings?
Yeah.
Now I think we're just, and I'm guilty of it too, but you get so many messages, electronic messages, right?
Yep.
Every single day, that nothing replaces having a coffee with somebody and really learning about what they do. It
Yeah.
just, so I
That's
hope I
really
helped as a marketer.
yes,
I hope that it sounded intelligent and there was some
you
real meat
did.
to it,
No, I think you did great.
and give me some criticism.
Oh, no, I think it was good. I think you answered really good questions. I think there's some good, I already was already picking out in my mind. I was like, oh, that's a good tidbit because we do audiograms out from this too, a couple quick quotes. So we'll start editing this. I'll send you the final
Cool.
version for your approval. Once you're happy
Great.
with it, I'll send you some social assets as well. And then we both promote and see what happens.
That sounds good. Zach Selch on the FEC, he's the
Oh,
CRO that does
yeah.
like global sales, right?
Okay. Yeah.
I approached him before to do like a series of
Okay.
webinars or LinkedIn Lives talking about the challenges of sales and marketing alignment.
Yeah.
And I think it would be really good for us to have a moderator. Would you be open to being a moderator for that?
Yeah. I'd love that. Great.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I'll resurrect that. There was someone else in FEC, and I don't think she's in FEC anymore. So the idea just dissolved.
Mm.
But I think it'd be cool.
Yeah, I love doing this sort of thing. This is good for business, but I also really enjoy it. So
Yeah, yeah,
this is
yeah.
my break
Okay.
from the day to day.
I will bring that to the forefront of what I'm doing. And
Perfect.
I can show you what the outline was that I thought. And we'll go from there.
Let me know when you guys are ready.
Cool. Okay,
Perfect.
cool. Yeah, because
All
I
right.
want to, Zach is very conversational, and I am too,
Yeah.
but it's late, Zach. We got to put some thought into,
Some
okay, this
structure.
is the topic. What are the 5 questions we're going to talk about?
Yeah.
So I need to like, I think that where your experience doing this interviewing, you'd be like, yeah, Keri, ask these 5 questions. We're good. And that's 40
Yeah.
minutes.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay.
Cool.
Thank you.
Have a
We'll
good
have a
weekend.
great weekend.
Bye.
Bye.